All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here. I am joined by my Senator, Corey McCray, my delegates, Kaylin Young and Jackie Addison, our Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, Anthony Barksdale, our Deputy Mayor for Community and Economic Development, Justin Williams. And before I begin talking about our upcoming session in Annapolis, I want to again briefly address the mass shooting that happened yesterday in Emerson Village, where Deontay Dorsey was murdered and 4 of his classmates were shot. Finding out who carried out that act is a top priority for us and for the police department, and our detectives continue to work around the clock to find them, and they will. And when they do, we will hand them over to the other parts of the justice system for swift and certain accountability. I also am going to do something that you can get used to from hearing from me here on out, and provide more details about guns that we are recovering here on the streets of Baltimore. So from January 1st to December 21st of last year, we were able to trace 816 weapons to their origin outside of the state of Maryland, compared to 580 from within. Virginia led the way with 168. Georgia was right behind with 158 weapons that we traced back. So when you hear me consistently talk about the flow of illegal guns into the city and where they're coming from and how they're getting here, that matters. The weapon that was most recovered was a Polymer 80, or a ghost gun, 444 of them, followed by Glock, 355, and 260 Smith & Wessons, which of course is why we last year filed a lawsuit against Polymer 80 and are trying to crack down on those purchases, and why we supported legislation in Annapolis last year to ban them. And some may ask the question, why where the weapon comes from matter, and the type, why do they matter? It matters because the lives lost on the streets of Baltimore at the hands of the individuals who pulled the trigger matter, and those who trafficked, straw purchased, bought, or sold that gun to someone that they know should not have had it. They're also responsible. And I want the trigger pullers to know, the people that are trafficking the weapons, the people that are selling them, that we are coming after all of them, because they all are a part of what's happening here. And when you think about the realities of Baltimore, there are folks who live in Emerson Village who have never been to the other side of Baltimore. We know they didn't go to Kentucky or Texas or California or wherever that game come from. Our transportation system isn't good enough for them to get across town. And we have to understand the reality that folks are making money, and not just in Baltimore, but it is time for this country, because we know our sister city in DC had a similar incident with young people this week, for us to really get serious about why is it that our country, the leader of the world, the free, the home of the American dream, seems to be the only well-developed country that is dealing with this issue of gun violence consistently over and over. And it's, in my opinion, it's because we have not as a country, as individuals we have, but not as a country, we have not yet gotten to a point where we value the lives of American people over the sanctity of American guns. We have to flip that script. We have to flip that script across this country, because if not, we're going to continue to talk about the loss of life over and over and over and over again, because this is not something that our state reps and state senators and delegates can do alone here in Maryland by passing some of the best gun laws in this country. We have to deal with this issue around the country, because people are trafficking weapons and selling weapons and making money off death, and that is not something that they should be doing. But as we near the 2023 state legislative session, it is crucial that we demonstrate a unified front and leverage the power of collaboration, coordination, and collective responsibility to drive this city forward. This year, we develop a comprehensive and ambitious set of budgetary and legislative goals to take to Annapolis. I've always said that the work to build a better, safer, more equitable Baltimore hinges upon our ability to forge strong partnerships across all levels of government. For the past 8 years, we have had a governor who has cut transit funding, opposed legislation designed to help Baltimoreans, and used the city as a punching bag for political talking points. Thankfully, in a few weeks, that will no longer be the case. This year, we will have a governor who has deep ties to Baltimore, understands the challenges that our communities face, and has shown that he cares about working with me. I saw him earlier today, our administration, to fulfill a vision, a shared vision for Baltimore's future. A governor who will work with our city, state, Senate delegation and House delegations to make Baltimore a better place for all, period. It is a different ball game. It's like going from Kyle Bowler to Lamar Jackson, if you want a football reference. And trust me when I say that my administration and our legislators are going to make the most of this new playing field and reality, and we are ready to work hand in hand with Governor-elect Moore. Our priorities for Annapolis are about building the Baltimore we want to see today and that we envision for the future. And finally, we are hopeful that we have the political environment to secure legislation and funding that will move us closer to realizing Baltimore's true potential. Our package is sitting around 3 overarching goals. Our top priority, of course, building public safety, supporting environment and infrastructure, prioritizing quality of life for our residents. And here are our top priorities for the session. Starting with our budgetary priorities for building public safety, we are looking to secure $20 million in state aid for the Police Protection Enhanced Warrant Service Initiative grants. Because of its flexibility for both operating and capital uses, this source of funds has been immensely helpful to the police department as it continues to improve and modernize. In fiscal year 2023, some examples of the approved uses include additional funds for overtime, visibility and patrol initiatives, recruitment and retention initiatives such as referral bonuses, signing bonuses, housing stipends, our civilization efforts, and equipment upgrades for our crime lab. We are also asking for $50 million in capital and operating funds for the design and construction of 2 new police districts, Northwest and Northeast. Both districts are beyond their useful life cycle, and it's in the best interest of our city to replace these locations with adequate facilities. We're also asking to restore funding for 3 Muncie programs designed to discourage recidivism, reduce violence, and perform outreach to victims of crime. Key parts of our comprehensive violence prevention plan. Safe Streets. The Tyrone Ray Safe Streets Act makes $3.6 million in funding available to Baltimore City for 10 Safe Streets installations, $360,000 per Safe Street site. In fiscal 2022, the funding was cut to $300,000, creating a $60,000 per site deficit. That funding is crucial in our ability to continue this work without the uncertainty of finding new funding sources to fill the gap. VOCA funding. The Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement is one of the beneficiaries of Victims of Crime Act. VOCA funding from the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention, Youth and Victim Services. Muncie relies on these funds to support personnel and other costs associated with programs to aid the victims of crime as a part of focusing and enhancing our victim services. And over the years, Muncie has seen a decrease in its grant awards and seeks to restore level funding from previous years. Much like VOCA, the funding Muncie receives for I Care Baltimore through Project Exile has also been on steady decline. In fiscal year 2022, Muncie received just under $69,000 compared to $250,000 in fiscal 2020, a nearly 73% reduction. This funding is central to elevating critical community-based violent intervention and prevention efforts across our city. In terms of legislation, we have a priority to address what has been a frustration thorn in my side that many of you in the media have heard me talk about: our police officers, our residents, families, and anyone who truly cares about the safety of our communities. We are pushing to decrease the time, currently up to 48 hours, that someone on home monitoring system can go missing or be out of the area before that person's missing status is reported to an administrative judge. We have seen this several times over the past few years where either people go out and commit crimes or are murdered on the streets of Baltimore. I myself have been on homicide scenes and seen people dead with a bracelet on their ankle. And we should not have that in our state. However, I am fully aware that that is just one piece of an intricate system of public safety that I'm looking forward to working with Governor-elect Moore, the entire General Assembly, and all of our partners on improving outcomes for our residents, including, and most importantly, holding violent offenders accountable, ensuring our laws are applied with fairness and justice, getting illegal firearms off the streets, and implementing comprehensive rehabilitation reforms to ensure that people who serve their time are able to re-enter into society and don't just end up right back in the justice system. In particular, I am looking forward to working deeply with the governor, his team, and the fine folks in the General Assembly around our juvenile system to make sure that we're building one that understands that young people their brains are different, so we can't treat them the same way that we treat adults, but that we also have to build deeper levels of accountability and making sure that we're working not just with them, with their families, especially when we continue to see the same groups of young people committing the same acts of crime, violent crimes, over and over and over again. We have to work together to build systems so that we don't ultimately lose those young people's lives and they don't take others. In the pursuit of long-term and lasting public safety efforts, I will continue to pursue legislation and budgetary requests that target the root cause of violence, particularly addressing high concentrations of blighted and vacant properties. In light of the communal harm caused by these properties, we will be asking the state for $100 million to address vacancy and eliminate blight in our city. Simply put, unsafe and unstable vacant structures present a very real danger to our residents, our first responders, and agency personnel. Besides being a physical hazard, these properties are often used to aid criminal activity. Addressing the intersection between blight and public safety is a critical component of my administration's attack on public safety, and it's one that will make our city safer for all residents. We have identified 3 key areas where funding is needed in order to allow us to make meaningful impact on the vacant structure issue that has plagued Baltimore for many, many, many years. $40 million in the capital operating funds for the city's vacant rehabilitation loan program, $50 million in capital funds to support the Impact Investment Area Redevelopment Fund, and $10 million in capital operating funds for the Baltimore City Community Land Trust. We are also looking at reforming the city's tax sale by establishing protections for owner-occupied properties and authorizing the city to enter into payment plans for all municipal debts, expanding the ability to utilize the in-rem process for vacant properties with tax delinquencies, and allowing for properties with outstanding liens to be transferred to heirs, which will preserve generational wealth and allow heirs to access programs that they are now locked out from. In addition, to my administration's own priorities, I look to supporting the following legislation being introduced by our delegation members on behalf of the residents of Baltimore. Senator McCrae's bill to streamline the state's property tax exemption application process, legislation from Senator Antonio Hayes of the 40th District to bridge the appraisal gap that has hampered economic growth in black and brown communities across the state, but nowhere has that been more prevalent than here in Baltimore. And Delegate Regina Boyce's bill to give the city the authority to set special property tax rate as a means to more equitably spread the load of property taxes, overcome barriers to home ownership, and entice new residents and businesses to come to Baltimore City, and to be quite blunt, to target those who sit on vacant blighted properties and think they can just sit on them and not do anything. We want to make sure that we have every tool in our toolbox to go after them for being neglect property owners. And Delegate Lewis's legislation to create a process for union recognition and collective bargaining for employees of the Walters Arts Museum, which will require both the management of the Walters and Employees Union to abide by the results of the election overseen by a neutral third party, and then bargain in good faith if a majority of employees vote for a union. I am incredibly excited to see what is in store in this upcoming session as it begins on January 11th. We have here in Baltimore the best delegation. They are experienced, dedicated, and we now have a governor who shares our vision for Baltimore's bright future and those whose priorities align with ours and understand the needs of the city. And we will work together in every single solitary way to make Baltimore a better place. Thank you, and with that, we'll take questions.
I have a question, Mayor Scott. In light of the deadly shooting yesterday, as you were preparing for this press conference today, what items on your wish list did you say, my words, oh man, if we just had this already, maybe we could have stopped that or we could have done something about it? Which of these priorities could have maybe prevented what happened?
No, Kate, I think you asked a great question, and I appreciate the question because this is one of these instances where I'm going to tell where there are going to be some hard truths, right? When we have to, when I say we, all of us collectively as humans, as Baltimoreans, we have to grow in our understanding in the way that we talk about acts of violence. Because oftentimes, and it's the world that we live in where everything is quick and instant and everyone wants to know the simple thing, you cannot simplify something as complicated as someone getting to a point where they're willing to take someone else's life. Because when you think about what happened, a mass shooting that happened yesterday, when you think about who's involved and everything that's been going on in that neighborhood specifically, a school that I spent time at yesterday and today, talking and hearing from staff members about all the efforts that they themselves have made with those students and others about not going out of school trying to go over there to get lunch, of going and asking business people to help, of trying to work with families, of figuring out what's going on with young people, from the police department who has been focused in that area because going out there, trying to make arrests of the right people, focusing in on the folks that we know are out there carrying out acts of violence and those things, to what we have been doing with trying to get that shopping center, and we're close to doing that, in the hands of ownership that actually cares about that community and wants to invest in that community, to the tune where we announced that the new owner is going to get a significant amount of money, $8 million from the city, to help rehabilitate that shopping center that has looked that way since Senator McCray was living in that neighborhood, right? We think about all that, and we haven't gotten to the fact that we haven't talked about what the conflict is, which we have to understand. And I know that some people were upset about the way I said it a few weeks, but people are dying over dumb stuff. We have to understand how we can do conflict resolution, not just in schools, how we can work with families around that at home, how we can talk about some of the cultural things that we have in Baltimore, in Maryland, in our country that allow people to think that's the way that they're supposed to carry out. Because in that moment, even if, Kate, there could have been a police officer standing there. How many times have you and I talked about an incident where someone shot someone and the police were right there, right? We have to think about all of that. We have to hold those who pull the trigger responsible. They are the immediate, but there are so many factors. There is no one answer to why someone did that and what would have prevented it, outside of them not being able to have that gun at that moment. And that's why every single gun matters, where it came from matters, who brought it here matters, why those people, individuals that pulled that trigger, they matter as well, but all the factors matter. And until we have all those details, what I think we have to stop doing is saying like, oh, this happened, and this we have to, and then we move on to the next one. Or we want a immediate answer or this detailed answer about something that's simple. There is no simple thing about murder. Murder is not a simple thing. You have to be not in your right mind. You have to be deeply hurt. As Dr. Bunley has said to us for many, many years in Baltimore, hurt people, and every single detail matters, and every single person that interacts with those individuals matter, because we all have a responsibility in that.
One of the priorities of the new state's attorney in Annapolis will be to ask for mandatory minimum sentences for misdemeanor gun offenders. Do you support that?
So I think, and what our state folks will tell you is that we have mandatory minimums in Maryland already. And I talked to the state's attorney about that. And what we have to do, Jeff, is we have to make sure that the laws on the books are enforced. What I will also say that again and again and again. And it's also about, as he says, and I say, we say the same thing, the swift and certain circumstances. And that's why we're going to continue to understand that in a deeper way.
So is it unnecessary?
We have mandatory minimums on the books in Maryland.
Oh, no, I didn't.
And no, go ahead.
This may be a question for Senator McCray, but I didn't see anything on there as far as you started out talking about out-of-state guns and the issue of out-of-state guns in Maryland. Is there anything that we're looking at legislatively in Annapolis on that front, or anything that you think is feasible this session?
So what I would say is that our state is not, our state folks are not the problem. They're great. What you hear me, when you hear me talking about that was an aside. That is an effort that we are having in partnership as we continue. As you know, when I first took office, we started a unit specifically around tracing and tracking guns that works with our fabulous U.S. Attorney Eric Barron. We have a great relationship with our ATF folks, and we are going to be working with them and here locally to do more work around that. And it's not just me. Mayors around the country will be doing that. We have been communicating with each other. We actually had a summit about it in September in New York, and we all are going to be focusing in not just on the individuals, right? But we're all going to be focusing, as you see, other mayors are suing polymer companies, traffickers, stores, whoever we can get the attention of, and accountability at all levels here. The person to pull the trigger is accountable. The person that trafficked the gun is accountable. The people who keep selling guns to people that they know are trafficking guns are accountable. All of them, and we're going to work in every angle that we can to hold them accountable too.
Do you have any concern that the policies of the former state's attorney have fueled any of this violence?
What I'll say is that people that are no longer elected are no longer elected. What I'll say is that what's fueling the violence is what you hear me talk about each and every day, right? We're talking about not just here in Baltimore, but around the country. Basic human conflict that has now evolved into gunfire, right? That's what we should be focusing on. And now that we have a new state's attorney, I believe that you will no longer be hearing from me in the near future as he gets deeper into the work, because I'm not expecting him to be able to come in and snap his fingers overnight and everything changes. But those record number of gun arrests that we made, that we're not arresting the same people over and over, and as we has been as a state's attorney, I've been basically allowed to do that deep work and partnership that he and I know we're going to do together. You know?
Mayor Scott, you just surpassed the 2-year mark in your administration. You're about halfway now. How would you rate your own performance, specifically looking at issues you campaigned on, and also, your inaugural address and the issues that you highlighted?
Yeah, I think Emily, you were not here that day. Somebody asked me that question. So I'm a very tough grader. So I give myself a B-. I'm a very tough grader.
Oh, expand on that.
Oh well. I'm about to say, one of your colleagues asked me that question, and I gave him a very long answer. But I don't want to repeat myself to the same. I think to the same outlet. But we'll send you exactly what I said.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Forgive me for asking. I'm not familiar with the history of the past, your other legislative agendas before this. But this sounds pretty ambitious. How much of that has to do with your kind of the stars aligning for you? You've got all these Democrats from Baltimore at the leadership post. Is this different from what you may have brought in past years, and how will you get it done?
Well, I think that, listen, it's about partnership. It's a little bit more ambitious. We've always been ambitious. We have great folks in our legislature. We have Senate President from Baltimore, who's great. We have the Speaker, Adrian Jones, who's from the Baltimore region, is great. And then we have the governor. And we have our fabulous delegation, our Senate delegation that has been led by Senator McCray, our House delegation has been led by Delegate Smith, who have always been great. We had former chairwoman Delegate Maggie McIntosh, and we just want to keep building on those work and those relationships that we have, not just here but around the state. And we have an ambitious agenda, and we believe we can get that done through partnership. But we also, I think, it's Kate, to also, and for you too, Emily, that we have to remember what we've been going through for the last 2 years, right? Like when I took office, the first thing that I did was tell everyone to go inside. There was no going to Annapolis that first year. There was still some hybrid stuff last year, right? Now we'll be back to a sense of normalcy here in Annapolis and in the world, really, where we can do the deep work that normally gets done.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Last one.
I haven't totaled the budget request that y'all have made, but how far above previous budget requests is this total?
I will get back to you on, we'll make sure we follow up with that with you.
One follow-up, if it is like significantly above previous requests, and I don't know off the top of my head if it is, but how confident are you that we'll be able to get all of that money? There's a big surplus this year, but leadership has kind of made some signals that they may be conservative in how much they can dole out the rainy day fund and things like that.
Well, my grandmother always said that closed mouths don't get fed. You have to ask for what you want. You have not because you ask not. And we're going to be working in partnership with the governor, with the General Assembly, with everyone to get what we believe is best for Baltimore.
Quick question.
Lesser.
If you could you give some insight into canceling the MLK Day parade? When's that?
Yeah, I think that, listen, we're going to be looking at that in the future. What I think we should be doing and working with both, obviously, because it's not something that we can unilaterally do, and thinking, I know for me, I know what I'll be doing is what I'll ask all of Baltimore to do. Dr. King was about service, and that's how I'll be spending my MLK Day, is doing things in service and making sure that we're talking about uplifting community through service and putting my hands in dirt and helping people out. And I ask that everyone that would normally go out and do the parade, that's what we should be doing. Thank you.